actually you have to select all the faces. So I'm going to use element to select everything, and then I'm going to do auto smooth. And now if I deselect the element, you can see that those shading errors have gone from the edge of the table, and I think that looks a lot better. Now where the angle is less than 18, the faces will be assigned to the same group, the same shading smoothing group. So this feature of Max is pretty robust, and it's quite a good way of fine-tuning the way your surface is going to render. So there we go, we've fixed the smoothing on the table, and that should render fine now. Okay, so we have our plinth, and the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our holy relic onto it. In this case, this is a temple to the teapot, so our holy relic is a primitive, and here it is. Here's a little fella. Now I could create a teapot, let's say on the home grid. There's our teapot, and then I could use the translation tools to actually move it to the top of the plinth. But you can see it's not very accurate. I got that wrong there, and I might have to fiddle around to actually get that to appear to be just on the surface. Looking for the, you can see I'm looking for the lines of the teapot to just about disappear there to show that it's actually touching the surface. It's not a very fast workflow, is it? So a feature which is pretty cool in Max is you can use auto grid to basically create primitives on any surfaces that you have in Max. So I'm just going to get rid of this teapot, select it and delete it with the delete key. I'm going to click on teapot so I can create a teapot, and I'm going to turn on the auto grid feature, which you can see here. And now you'll see that when I move my cursor over the table, when it encounters polygons which aren't frozen, you can see that the tripod of my selection will actually conform to the surface. So this is probably best seen if I'm, oops, just undo that. If I just move down the surface here, you can see it's actually conforming to the surface. So if I choose a point on the surface and just click and draw, you can see Max is, actually it's not very visible there, is it? So let me just undo that, change it to wireframe mode, and do that again. You can see that Max is creating a grid in that place, which actually aligns with that face. I'll do the same here, same here, same here. So I've got a pretty crazy looking plinth now. I've got these teapots growing all over it, which is not really what I wanted. But it demonstrates exactly what this tool does. It's very useful when you're set dressing sometimes and you want to place things quite quickly. So let's just get rid of those teapots by doing Control Z a few times to undo it. And I'm just going to go to the center of the plinth and create my teapot on there. There we go. So we've got our holy teapot. That's cool. Just turn off auto grid and go to selection mode so we don't create any more teapots. And the next thing I want to do is I want to have a copy of this plinth. I want to give the feeling that maybe at some point in the past this temple used to have more relics, and maybe it's a little bit ruined. So I'm going to create a second plinth, and I'm going to break it up into two parts. So to do that, I'm going to select this plinth, and you can quite quickly and easily copy objects in Max by holding down Shift and doing any kind of transformation, rotation, scale, whatever you choose. So in this case I'm just going to move it over on Y-axis. It then brings up the clone option, and you can see that I can choose to copy it, instance it, reference it, and if I choose to change the number of copies, it will actually create more than one copy and will apply the transform that I've just done on each copy as well. So let's just show you that. And you can see I've just made a quick run of plinths there, mass produced 8 of them, and you can see each time they've been transformed. So I'm just going to undo that. Now you would have seen there are other options. As I said, there wasn't just copy, which will just create a simple copy of the plinth, but there's also instance, to instantiate or to create a reference. So I'm just going to quickly show you what those two things do. So I'm going to create one instance, and I'm going to get this one, and I'm going to move this over here, and this one is going to be a reference. And to show you what the difference is between instanced objects and reference objects, I'm going to put a twist modifier on the main table, on the main plinth. So let's go to modifiers, let's go down to twist modifier, apply it to the table, and you can see that all three plinths have now got the twist modifier on it. Now the interesting thing is that twist modifier is actually instanced to each table because it's brought along by the instancing. Now what I'm going to demonstrate to you here is that referencing is a kind of instancing, but what it does is in comparison to an instance is at the point that you reference the object, the instancing stops. So in this case the table is the plinth has been instanced and the modifier gets passed on to the instance here, and the same thing happens here. It gets passed on because it's on the original plinth. Now if I change the parameters of this twist modifier, you can see that all the tables get modified. So that's quite a useful tool. It means that you can create one plinth, and then you can very quickly populate a scene with hundreds of plinths, and then if somewhere down the line you think to yourself, oh god, the plinths really should have some addition made to them, it's very easy to apply a modifier, do something to the plinth, and that modification will be applied to all of its instances, and also all of its references as well. So what is the difference between an instance and a reference? Well, to show that, I'm going to apply a taper modifier to this reference. So let's go down to modifiers, taper, and you can see that this modifier has only actually been applied to just this reference. I'm going to modify the taper, so let's make the top of the plinth much smaller, and let's change the curve. Let's make it a little bit larger again. So there we go. We've made quite a major change to the top of this plinth, and I'm going to go to the original plinth and change the twist so it's a bit more dramatic. And you can see that the twist modifier is applied to the instance and the reference, but you can see that the modifier which was applied to the reference isn't applied to either the original or the other instance. And that's because from the point that this plinth was referenced, it effectively took on a new branch to its history. So the thing about instances is that they will share everything. Each instance is the same as all the other instances, but the difference with the reference is that it's exactly the same as the parent that it came from, up to the point that it was actually created, and from that point on it's unique. Any other modifiers that you apply to the reference will only apply to the reference, but any modifiers that you apply to the original will be applied to both the original and the reference. So that's actually quite useful. You've got a choice of having the history being exactly the same on all instances, or you've got the chance of having a branching taking place by using references. So as an example, we'll put a bend on this instance, and don't forget this instance is exactly the same as this instance, so any modifiers that we apply to it get to apply to all instances. So I'm going to put a bend modifier on here and change the values in it, and you can see that it gets applied to this object because they're instances, and this object because these two objects share the same history. This shares the same history, but it branches after the creation point. So quite a lot of flexibility there. Very powerful architecture. It's also very robust. The instancing in Max is very functional, doesn't really have any bugs, and it's very advantageous to use it when you're rendering, because effectively in terms of computer memory, 4,000 instance tables is just one table. So it's a very cool feature in terms of memory usage and animation capabilities, and also seen